When I was 8 years old, I was in second grade in middle school in Europe, where I went to school to and where I grew up. And most specifically, I am from Eastern Europe, and here things are a little bit different than the rest of Europe, although many things are the same or, very similar. Now, the part where I am from is Eastern Europe, although it can also be called Central Europe. So, we are in between areas, so to speak. And we also had some Soviet influences and major historical shifts that our nation sometimes just couldn't handle. Most of us regard our being alive as a miracle, even though we never talk about it like that, because all we ever do these days is struggle to survive. Even though we live in a quote unquote developed country, we sometimes struggle to make ends meet. And I have realized that people from the US tend to idealize Europe as if it was nirvana or something. But the truth is that Europe is also Christian. It is from the same roots that the US economy is. Not only that, Western influence has been taking over Europe unlike any other continent, in my opinion, because Africa has its own climate and Asia has its own religions. So I'm not talking about islands like Australia, because um, Australia, for example, it's a whole another place in and of itself. But Europe is not so glamorous as you may think. We have major historical traditions and patterns and um, you know events that are so significant that unless a child grows up to learn and adopt those things, they will, be ostracized almost. And if this is not the case, um, a European can hardly feel themselves belong to somewhere or even to a country unless they adopt the belief system that most of their nation has acquired throughout the years through life experience. And not only that, many Europeans, if not most, speak not just their native language but another European language. Usually, the one of the few non-European languages that many Europeans speak are English, some Asian language like Chinese, or you know some Slavic language like Russian. Now, I am aware that the UK speaks English, but I'm talking about American English, which has mostly been popularized by the internet. And so most Europeans these days, I believe, speak American English, even though I learned British English in school. I really appreciate that though, because I believe it has a certain tonality and rhythm to it that American just does not have. So, speaking of the US, I have met people from the US in person, and what really struck me about them was that they were loud. Um, the first time I met a person from the US, one of the first times, I believe, was when I was like around 20, 21, 22 years old, and I attended a workshop of an American YouTuber, and she even said that she tends to be perceived as loud because she's American. Now, I would I would go into detail in there. Like I would specifically elaborate on that, because I believe that just saying someone is loud is not the entire picture when it comes to a nation or nationality. What I have seen is American people, they're more open-minded, they're more straightforward in a way, they are more cross-culture, so to speak. They do not really care about national identity or even appearance, although they can, but generally speaking they hang out with people of all types, so they are more used to that. People who look different or speak differently, things like that, but they also kind of judge differently. They judge people based on first impressions differently, because they are a bit more simple, in my opinion. They do not think deeply in a lot of ways, but professionally speaking, they are very conscientious and professional and scientific. So, just the way that Christianity is, which is, I believe, the most popular religion in America right now, they can be very, intelligent and focused and almost critical, to the point that they are punctual enough because of it, but at the same time they tend to kind of remain on the surface compared to the country that I am from, or at least that's my perception. And when I say they remain on the surface, I mean they kind of tend to stick to their judgments. Like they think something of someone and they kind of validate it and verify through their own words, if you know what I mean. And because America is heavily individualistic and capitalistic and is a major country that believes that that is functional today as like a socio-economic structure, women and men both have opinions that they are fearless to make known, but this is not very special compared to Europe. What I would say makes it more special is that in Europe, people tend to kind of be silent in certain situations, whereas for example, if you see an American travel on the train, it's almost like they're kind of used to their having space. So they will speak out loud, they will kind of say what's on their mind. Again, I'm kind of judging based on a few real life experience and a decade of online research, but I may be wrong, okay? So this is not everyone, I'm just generally speaking. So usually Americans seem to be okay and very much in ownership of their own personal space and the space that they occupy with friends. I mean, that is not unlike Christianity by any means. If anything, it is very like the cool, laid back type of Christian person that, takes over America and then makes it their own. So it's almost the same vibration or energy. It's very, almost leadership oriented. But when you come to Europe, you just don't notice this type of free spirit in a way, in most parts, to say that at least, because again, history, when you come to Europe, you will see that there are buildings that are as old, if not older, than the American continent itself, from the time that it has been occupied by English speakers and people from Europe. So because it has such diverse history and it has every type of state and nation inside of it that has their, its own rights and beliefs and kind of entitlement to who they are as a nation, unlike in America, because America is one nation and they all speak the same language. People from Europe tend to kind of believe that, they are like belonged to where they were born into. And there are very few people who actually take the leap to, for example, change the continent or change their country even. I see more and more incentive among the youth to abandon this pattern and actually move to a different country. And I see youth doing this in unprecedented numbers, which I really like, because I am one of those open-minded individuals in Europe who just basically was raised by American YouTube. So, I have most of the beliefs that people in America today understand. And, I really would not really care if I have to abandon my nation altogether and not raise children here. So that's one thing. The diverse history makes it like almost impossible to abandon your background and your past as a European, in my opinion. And this, together with the community mindset, or at least in Eastern Europe, makes it so heavy for you to leave that, you kind of like are stuck. And even people who do not believe this consciously or on the surface, they do not declare this, they live in a mindset of suppression in a lot of ways, unlike many Americans. But at the same time, Americans tend to be different in that they do not suppress based on community standards. They rather suppress because they have to survive as an individual, in my opinion. What this means, and what I mean by this, is Americans, in my opinion, tend to kind of, buoy themselves among like standards of society, or they kind of tend to not really care about social status for benefit of making their own status higher. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that Americans in general are the source of individualism in my eyes, because Europeans would have never been able to start this structure alone. So Americans in general, I kind of like about them that they take up space, because I kind of get to see the nature of humanity in that way. And I like to perceive cultural differences anyway all the time, because it makes me more conscious of who I am and who I am not, and who I have been and who I have not been, because I am the type of person who will believe I am the result of my personal experience and upbringing, and also I am none of those things. I am what I am met with whenever I meet a new person, and when I recognize something about them, I am also capable of acquiring that trait or attribute. So I am very open-minded in general, and when I see a cultural difference between myself and the person that I am with who's not from Europe, I just really appreciate seeing what I could be like, and learning from them. This is true for me in general when it comes to meeting new people and even knowing more about myself. But when I, meet like someone from Africa, for example, I kind of see their nature shine through, and it has nothing to do with personal experience of mine or my judgment about them. It's really just something that reflects their humanity. And when I say I like Americans taking up space, it's that because America is generally larger as a continent, and it has a lot of states, and people fly on planes to change states instead of use train or bus or car most of the time. They are also used to overcoming greater distances, if you know what I mean. They're kind of used to taking the leap and jumping from one place to another, and with that own their path. Now, the reason, like the scenario I am thinking about when I say these words is one where I heard some people in my country specifically speak on the train, and I started listening to their conversation for like the first 5 minutes that I got on the train from. And what really came across to me was really just how unhinged they are in a way. Like when I sit down on a train, and maybe this is just specific to my country, even among European countries, but when I sit down on a train, I just stay silent, or even if I speak, I'm very polite and silent, very quiet. I never speak about like what someone else looks like when it comes to a lack of class in general in Europe, you will not see a form that is mild. You will see someone who is like really extreme almost, or at least in Eastern Europe, that's what I'm used to. So you will see someone who's shady looking. You will see someone who talks questionable and says swear words and things like that, but you will not see someone who's like really proud of just being a judgmental person and then look polished, because the latter is kind of the American type, and it's kind of a middle version of shady. I'm sorry about judgmental way of speaking, but at the end of the day, I do have to make a judgment to form an opinion about a person. So in general, patriarchy is really popular. Like it's really pronounced and significant and prominent in Europe, and mainly in Eastern Europe. But Americans kind of see this kind of in a different way, because of feminism and the power that it already started gaining, and the popularity it already has, and the effects it already had in businesses, for example. Men have kind of become softer in America than in Europe, in my opinion, like physically, I mean, or maybe emotionally as well. But I'm not really sure, because it's kind of like it can be compared to the space people have in their lives in general. Like, because people in Europe tend to kind of be pretty spaced out, but not as far from each other in a lot of ways. And there is at least something that connects two members of a nation, like history or language, that actually is unique to those individuals. Whereas in America, it's almost like America is its own island where everyone speaks everyone's language, and the only differentiator is just, I don't know, shallow traits like skin color or income, for example. But in Europe, this is slightly different because Europeans are already heavily burdened by their upbringing in a way where they do not, they either completely disown it or they completely attach themselves to it. So it's like they derive more of their identity from it, if you know what I mean. Whereas Americans tend to be more individualistic in that no matter how they have been raised, they kind of adopt beliefs of the whole country of the United States of America. I'm not sure if this is a good or a bad thing. Like, I'm really uninfatuated when I'm saying these words. It's just that because like Europeans have a different depth of identity from their upbringing, they also kind of tend to like feel important due to different reasons and different things, and I mean, there are just many differences I cannot even put into words, but basically, because of this slight difference of identity, it's like people who take up space, people who are from America who take up space, they tend to kind of look more confident, if you know what I mean. And maybe it's just me, but it's almost like you can see their level of self-esteem despite or alongside their confidence level. So it's like when they start speaking, you will kind of immediately recognize whether they have, a high level of confidence or self-esteem together with the confidence and substance and the depth of their knowledge and emotional maturity. But generally speaking, I think Americans are more honest. Somehow, that's my perception. Authenticity seems really important to them, especially these days, especially because many business owners are women in there. Because women are generally quite authentic, if you know what I mean. I think they're also kind of no, actually they're much more positive than most people I have met in my life because they laugh a lot, they make people laugh, and it's like they do not take themselves seriously the way that Europeans do. Again, it's because of history, but this is like so much fun that they are showcasing. Like, I'm kind of jealous, but generally speaking, because of their altitudes and natural, environments and places that they are from, and generally diversity in culture, they tend to be more adventurous in a way, and this reflects in their speech as well. Like, when they think something, even if they're professional about it, they would not like put it in a way where it's like, very humble, or even if they do put things into humble words or phrases, they will also have a high level of class to that when they do that. So for example, it's almost like the extremes of them speaking in certain ways or in other ways comes across not in how they kind of judge people based on superficial traits as much. Nevertheless, that is also present in America, but when it comes to Americans speaking, they kind of seem to represent one extreme by being either very high class and very like educated and almost made up in a way, but not at the expense of their own value and what they bring to the table and what they share and how much intelligence they educate others with. And on the other hand, they can also be kind of the opposite of that type of self presentation, but they do not, suffer a lack of confidence as a result, and they do not kind of lose their economic presence as much, in my opinion. Like their economic status may change, but their economic like identity as an American remains, which is, I think, the core of most Americans' like self-esteem. Even maybe I'm wrong again. Maybe my words are too deep, even. But American identity in general just seems to give so much confidence to any person who opens their mouth who is American, that is like, I'm jealous of that as a European, because here national identity can give a similar amount of personal, esteem, but it's not like so flexible, if you know what I mean. It's not like, okay, I can just travel abroad and see the rest of the world and still, people there speak my language. And no, it's like, in order to just leave my city, I have to get on a train, bumpy ride, 3 hours, see some 500-year-old buildings along the way, graffiti all along, abandoned playgrounds, and cut trees, and sad people, overworked people who generally are on the same socioeconomic level, and it's just a lot of input. It's just a lot of information to take in for someone who's not used to it. It's just like much deeper. It can penetrate a much deeper level as an experience if you haven't been in Europe, when you are in Europe. So America seems to be a bit more flexible in a lot of ways. It's almost like they do things they know they kind of we will be judged for, but they do it anyway, even just as a way of experimentation. So it's like, they are free, but they are also like very much in alignment with American identity in general. And even if they do not choose to be, they just speak in a way that makes it obvious that they are from there. So it's like their accent, their, you know, even their face, like the way their face looks just looks less worn in a way. Like, I don't care which country an American's parents are from and how much the parents have been going through. If I see like middle-aged American with a certain attitude, and I look at their face, I somehow see less wrinkles. I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm just judging, maybe I'm just wrong, maybe I'm just ignoring the party hard type of people who are now in their 50s and 60s, and they also, went through a lot. But generally speaking, it's almost like Americans have more space to recover from trauma, and they kind of have more people to reach out to if they go through something life changing, like the loss of a loved one. Again, maybe I'm wrong, and it's just the economic perception of a wage gap, um, like, based on the economy where I'm from, but the resources we have here for traumatized people are no different than what people in the western part of the world have. And so everything is mainly American influence here anyway, which is based on an economic situation and economic benefits in general. But since America is kind of the homeland for outsourcing economic benefits, so to speak, and just connecting cultures and connecting people throughout families and kind of like businesses as well, and kind of multiple businesses being in the same place, and regardless of personal history and I don't know if you know what I mean, but I feel like when Americans gather, they tend to be more like diverse in their background, in what business field they're in, and what family background they have, and even what country their parents are from, for example. But once they overcome the distance of I am in this city and you are in that city, so to speak, they can also be very understanding and friendly, unlike many other people I know.